Okay, hello everyone. So at 7 o'clock, we're going to get started. This is the presentation on Norroa, and we have with us Brian Manley. Brian Manley he's the Director of Global Technical Sales Support, Bee and Animal Health for Greenlight Biosciences. He has 30 years of experience in a number of regional field development and global product development roles. He joined Greenlight Biosciences in 2018, and among other responsibilities, has led the field research program and overall product development of Norroa and contributed to several publications of the research results, including there's a specific paper that I alluded to in the marketing for promotion for this talk, RNA interference as a next generation control method for suppressing Varroa destructive reproduction in honeybee hives, and we'll put that in the notes, and that was published in Pest Management Science in December 2025. Brian holds a doctorate in weed science from Virginia Tech University and a Bachelor of Science in Agronomic and Crop Science from Delaware Valley College. So he has roots in the area. So with that, I will hand it off to you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Yasmin and Carissa, for arranging this and giving us the opportunity to share a bit of information on Norroa. As Yasmin said, I've got some roots in Pennsylvania. My folks and two of my sisters still live in the Carlisle area, so um, very familiar with the area. So glad to have the opportunity to share a bit about Norroa. So as Yasmin said, I've been in the industry for roughly 30 years. Uh, the last, I won't bore you with all of my background, but um, grew up on a small farm in northern Maryland and then moved to Pennsylvania in high school and uh, went to college at Delaware Valley College initially and then graduate school at Virginia Tech. But I had a number of R&D roles with Syngenta and its legacy companies, and then joined Greenlight Biosciences in 2018 to build up our field testing capabilities. And along the way, we purchased the rights to this technology, and I've led the field testing and overall product development of this product, and very excited and very proud to have helped bring it to market and make it available to beekeepers. So I'll go through um, some background and information on what Norroa is, and hopefully convince you to give it a try. So it's a brand new technology, a brand new and novel approach to varroa mite management. I'll kind of explain how it works and why it's different than other mite control products. I had to put the legal disclaimer in, so basically don't make any investment decisions based on the information I will share today, all that sort of thing. I'm not the lawyer, but was told I had to have that in there. So just a little bit, a very brief introduction to Greenlight Biosciences for those that aren't familiar with the company. Um, Greenlight Biosciences is a company mostly focused on delivering solutions for the agricultural market based on the RNA technology. Um, we are uniquely positioned with a proprietary production system that allows us to produce RNA at a much more affordable price than others have been able to do in the past, and that's allowed us to advance some solutions for pest control based on the RNA double-stranded RNA technology. We've got a industry-leading pipeline with around 8 solutions that are in various stages of trials, which address, potentially $9.4 billion in addressable market potential. And so that's largely across the range of crops, and we're focused on crop protection markets primarily in those other segments. But we also have a bee and animal health unit, which I officially became a member of in November, and focused on delivering solutions for honeybees. And this product Norroa is the first of those. We've got a discovery engine that allows us to And this is one of the unique advantages of the RNA technology is you can develop these solutions initially using bioinformatics to very specifically design and target pests so that these solutions have essentially little or no off-target effects. And that's one of the great things about the RNA technology. One of the other great things about this technology is also got a great environmental profile, and so the RNA solutions degrade rapidly in the environment. They're usually gone in soil and water within a couple of days, and so again, you couple that together with the very targeted approach, and there's essentially little to no off-target effects from these solutions. Um, and they can be done because of the safety of the technology. The discovery and development of them can be done much faster and at much less cost than a traditional chemistry. Um, we've got solutions that address a number of different pest targets in other crops, and so we're developing several different insecticides targeting different insects. We launched our first product, Calantha, which targets the Colorado potato beetle at the end of 2023. And Norroa is our third product to be registered. We do have an adjuvant that we're using to boost the activity of insecticides, but we're also developing some fungicides to address disease control in crops, as well as we also have a herbicide technology that we're working on. And so I like to believe we're an up and coming company, still small startup scale at the moment, but we believe that we've got a great potential down the road with uh, some great products that will help improve crop production, but also have less impact on off-target, non-target things. And obviously, one of the big ones of those is honeybees. And so, our first product, Calantha, for example, is one of very few insecticides that has no impact on honeybees. And Norroa equally very specifically targets the varroa mite without having any impact on the honeybees. And I'll go through that a bit. It is, again, a brand new technology, brand new mode of action for varroa mite control, as well as a new approach to controlling varroa. It works very differently than most miticides. It doesn't actually kill the adult mites, but it prevents them from reproducing, and as such, that has impacts on how you should use the product as well. And I'll go through that. Does give long-lasting control, and we've seen that in a number of field trials that we've conducted over the last really 5 years now, all over the globe. We've done a lot of trials here in the US. We've done trials in Canada, in Europe, and in New Zealand. Um, the product supports bee health, not just by managing the mite, but also having no impact. It is relatively easy to use, and as I mentioned earlier, has a great environmental profile as well. So as I said, Norroa works very different than other miticides. It's formulated into a sucrose solution and packaged in a pouch similar to the one you see on the left of the slide here. Um, it that pouch has perforations in it, and there's an adhesive sticker over top of the perforations. And so you place the pouch inside the colony. It can be placed on top of the frames with a spacer or on the bottom board, but basically you peel that sticker off, that exposes the perforations, and the bees do all the rest of the work. They take up the solution just like they would another nectar source, and what you want them to do is store it in the brood chamber, so they'll use it over time. And as is indicated on the left-hand side, this is a depiction of the bee life cycle. And I'm going to try and get a pointer here. Basically, what happens is that the queen you guys should be familiar with this, but the queen lays her cell, develop larva develops, the bees or nurse bees are feeding that larvae, and just prior to capping, what happens is the varroa mite foundress moves into the cell and hides under the developing larvae, and with Norroa or Vatiscana, which is the active ingredient, um, gets incorporated into the brood food, and the mite is exposed in the brood food under the developing larvae. And essentially, the Norroa targets an essential protein in the mite and prevents the production of that protein. A lot of the pesticides target proteins and bind up that protein and prevent its function. In this case, we are specifically targeting a gene in the mite, and that gene is involved in the production of an essential protein. And without that protein, the mite can't reproduce. So you see a long-term effect on mite populations, and that has impacts on how you should use the product. You want the product, you basically want the bees initially to store the product. So what we recommend is that the colony not be starving at the time. We usually recommend to feed the colony ahead of time and then put the Norroa in so that the bees are storing the material instead of eating it. You don't want them to consume it right away. You want them to use it over time in the brood food because the mites have to be exposed in the brood food under the developing larvae. Um, the and so the other point that I guess is important to point out here is that you want relatively low mite populations at the time of treatment. With most of the miticides, you're basically waiting for the mite population to build up until you get to that treatment threshold and then knocking the mite numbers down. And by doing that, you're already putting the colony at some risk because of the fact that the mites are transmitting viruses and other diseases. With Norroa, you want to be treating prior to reaching that threshold. So, less than 3 mites per 100 bees, ideally, and then allow Norroa to keep those populations low. I'll talk a little bit more later on about sort of preferred timing of application, but how does Norroa work? So as I mentioned, it's preventing reproduction of the mite. This is some evidence behind that. This was a study we did in New Zealand and is included in the publication that Yasmin mentioned at the beginning, was coordinated by a PhD student, Rose McGruddy, and basically they used mini hive system like this, and there was a feeding chamber on one side and several frames of brood on the other side. The brood was set up, and then they were sort of staged so that the brood was all more or less at the same point of development. And just prior to capping, the Norroa was placed in those mini hive colonies, and about a day later, varroa mites were introduced just prior to capping. And so normally in a colony, the foundress mite lays could be up to 5 eggs, and so she'll lay a male egg, and then that male offspring develops, and then there'll be anywhere from 2 to 5, 2 to 4 female offspring, which the male mite mates with, and of course you end up with that's what leads to the explosive growth in mite populations. So with Norroa, basically we're preventing the development of those offspring. And so with the Norroa in the colony, that foundress mite can't reproduce, and so you don't get this explosion in the mite population. And this was some of the data out of that study. On the left-hand side are the number of cells that were infested with mites, and this was specifically the female offspring. And you can see that we had in this study, we had 2 different doses of Vatiscana and a non-targeting double-stranded RNA control, as well as just a sucrose blank. And so this was, again, the number of infested cells, and both the untreated control, the sugar control, and the non-targeting double-stranded RNA control had a little over 2 mites um, per infested cell on average. And the Vatiscana treated cells had essentially no offspring, um, com almost completely prevented reproduction of the mites. So you had a very controlled system here and clearly demonstrated that we're reducing the number of offspring. We had no effect on the number of foundress mites that were found in those cap cells, but had a very significant impact on the number of offspring that were found. And this was the main study that we used to sort of demonstrate kind of how Norroa works. At the same time, she also assessed the developing larvae, and this is the proportion of living pupae that were uncapped from those cells when she uncapped the cells. And as you can see, Norroa had no impact on the developing bee larvae in this study either, with the same proportion of living pupae coming out as the two controls. And we've demonstrated that over and over again, both in lab studies as well as in field studies, that Norroa is extremely safe on the honeybee colonies, on honeybees and the colonies, I should say. So this is a piece of data we really like to rely on to just kind of show the potential of Norroa, and it demonstrates what we would say is kind of the preferred timing is to use this product in the spring when your colonies are really getting going, and shortly after brood starts to after the queen starts laying, give her a couple weeks to start laying, and so you need to have active brood present in order for the mites to be exposed. And so in these studies, this was a cross-trial summary of 5 different trial locations: Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Maine, and North Dakota. So all sorts of different geographies and different beekeeping practices. We worked with commercial beekeepers and a trained bee specialist to run the trials, and again, treated in the spring. In this case, it was a full season trial, so we treated once in the spring, came back in the fall, somewhere between 15 and 18 weeks after the spring treatment, and treated with another fall treatment, and then kept these colonies and assessed them for their overwintering success. And essentially, the red line is the untreated control, and as you would expect, mite numbers build up slowly initially and then really exploded towards the end of this 18-week period. The gray line is the chemical treatment, the standard chemical, which at the time was Amitraz or Apivar. And you can see it worked reasonably well initially, but then by 12 weeks it was already breaking, and at 18 weeks was pretty much completely exploding in terms of the number of mites. Whereas the Norroa treated colonies in the spring kept the mite numbers below the treatment threshold all the way out to about 18 weeks after treatment. And again, the fall treatment went in about this time, and this was the overwintering data from those colonies. So this is the proportion of colonies that survived overwintering. And you can see the untreated control, we lost about 85% of the colonies in this study or set of studies. And the chemical treatment, we lost about close to 60% of the colonies. And with the Norroa treatment, we only lost about 30% of the colonies. So a huge improvement in colony strength going into the overwintering period, and much better overwintering success from these colonies. Again, no impact on the bees, and much stronger colonies going into overwintering compared to the other treatments. So that is what I would say is our preferred timing is to use the product early in the season and let Norroa keep the mites down through the productive part of the season. If you're producing honey, it's going to allow the colony to be strong and produce more honey. If you're into pollination at all, then it certainly allows more bees for pollination as well. And so, instead of waiting for the mites to get high and then knocking them back, Norroa can keep them down all through the season. Now, we have also tested it in the autumn, and again, with Norroa, you want mite numbers to be low. And so what we recommend typically is that if your mite numbers are getting high and either above or approaching the treatment threshold, that Norroa should probably be combined with another miticide to basically knock the mite numbers down and then allow Norroa to keep them down. So the purpose of this study, this was done in Florida, so we treated in October, and the purpose was to evaluate some potential partners. So we looked at oxalic acid, we looked at amitraz combination as well. And so those treatments were all put on at the same time as the Norroa in the treatments where we included them. And as it turns out, the mite numbers weren't quite as high as we had hoped at the beginning. We wanted them to be slightly above treatment threshold, and they were really kind of right at treatment threshold. And as a result of that, Norroa by itself worked really well, keeping mite numbers down through the entire 18-week period in which these colonies were assessed. Um, and the combinations worked well as in addition to that, but Norroa by itself in this case worked quite well. But we have seen cases where if you're going into a high mite load situation, Norroa will keep the mite numbers where they are, but you really want something else to knock the mite numbers down if you're up above treatment threshold. And in this case, the untreated colony, the red line, really exploded through the fall. And so come I think this was the beginning of December where this peak was. We actually started losing colonies in the untreated treatment already at this point, and that's part of the reason you see the mite numbers dropping down in the untreated control, in addition to the fact the brood was slowing down at that time of year as well. And this was overwintering results from that same study. So in this study, the untreated control, we lost about 60% of the colonies, and all of the Norroa treatments had essentially 100% survival. Um, so very safe to the bees, did a great job of protecting the colonies and allowing them to be a little more robust going into the winter and survive the winter. So that's just some evidence on how Norroa works and the fact that it does work. It'll give up to 18 weeks worth of suppression of the mite populations if it's used appropriately. And it provides a new mode of action. So both a new approach, a new technology, and a new mode of action, and can be a great resistance management tool in terms of trying to manage varroa mites. We recommend that it does get used in rotation with other, whether it's other miticides or other cultural controls to help manage mites, but it's in terms of effective modes of action, you guys don't have that many really effective solutions for varroa mites, and so it's important to try and keep these tools around as long as possible. But a couple of advantages that Norroa has over some of the other products is the fact that it is so safe to bees. The efficacy is good, and you get very long control, so you don't have to go in and continue to treat and retreat and treat again. And in addition to that, because of the safety of the technology and the product, it requires very little in the way of personal protective equipment. And what was the other point I wanted to make here? I think, the temperature flexibility. So several of these products, as you probably know, for example, formic acid has significant temperature restrictions around it. And Norroa essentially can be used anytime it's safe to open the colony. Really no temperature restrictions on it at all. So I guess starting to sum up the key points for Norroa, it's easy to use, and you shouldn't need a lot of extra labor or equipment to use it. Um, it's it's going to be relatively simple, and the use instructions, the product works, but it's also lower risk to your bees. With that pouch, again, you just peel that sticker off, put the pouch in the colony, The dose is 2 pouches per brood box. I guess that's an important thing I didn't mention earlier, but it's 2 pouches per brood box. So if you've got a single deep, you could use 2 pouches. If you've got a double deep colony, you would need four. But basically, the pouches can be put anywhere inside the colony. They can be put there at one time or split them, place 1 pouch, come back 2 to 3 weeks later and put the second pouch in, depending on your preference and how you're managing the colony. Um, so it's simple and easy to apply. It comes basically ready to go, so no pre-mixing needed, no measuring. Very simple. Because of the fact that you get the extended control, that means fewer trips and fewer treatments, and no requirements for special equipment. And as I mentioned, the personal protective equipment on our label is very minimal. No need for big respirators, and doesn't even require gloves. Um, and as I mentioned, there's no temperature restrictions. You can use the product anytime it's safe to go into the colony. And I think, if I remember right, this is my last slide, but basically, just to hit on that point a little bit harder, as you are probably familiar, some other products have temperature restrictions. Either don't use them below a certain point, or don't use them above a certain temperature. And Norroa basically is safe as long as it's safe to open the colony. You can use the product, and not have to worry about the bees. I think in terms of uptake from the pouches, excuse me, we typically see the pouches emptied within about 2 to 3 days under normal conditions. We did a study looking at temperature effects on uptake from the pouches, and even down around 40 to 45 degrees. It took them a bit longer, up to a week, for them to empty the pouches, but they still emptied them, and the product was still effective. So um, I think with that, I'm gonna stop talking, and maybe we can have a open dialogue and discussions. I will leave this slide up briefly anyway, in case somebody wants to get contact information. Um, uh, Eric Walgren is our salesperson, sales lead for the country, and so he would be sort of the first point of contact. But certainly Adam Packel, who's the North American technical manager for Bee Health, was supposed to give this presentation, but got pulled away on some other responsibilities. And I'm as Yasmin mentioned, I'm the director for global technical sales support, and helping the team as well. So with that, I'll stop talking and see if there's any questions.
Yes, thank you, Brian. So we do have some questions in the chat. So I'm going to read the questions, and I invite you, as I read your question, if you have any follow-ups, feel free to come off mute and expand on the question. So the first question we have is from Regina, who is asking, any plans to eventually provide in this in a powder form that beekeepers can mix with sugar syrup? It would help with the cost and weight of the product.
Um, so we're working on a number of things to address both cost and, I guess you might say, delivery convenience. I think this current delivery system works extremely well. It's well tested, um, and is very reliable. I think it's a great way to introduce the technology. Um, we recognize that the cost, if you've started looking already, is a bit of a premium to some of the other products. But I think if you can step back and think about the benefits of the technology, the longer control, the fact that you don't have to go back and retreat, in addition to the safety to bees, um, there's certainly some value for those features. That said, we're working on a number of things to bring down cost. I think at the moment we're still in our pilot plant, and we'll soon be transitioning over to a full-blown production facility. And as that ramps up supply, we would expect underlying cost to produce the product to go down, and that will translate into some savings for one thing. We're also working on a a bulk delivery option for larger beekeepers, commercial beekeepers in particular. But that's a way of, getting rid of the current packaging, put the product directly in a feeder in its current formulation. That will certainly drive some cost out of the system as well. Um, but beyond that, so that's sort of probably within the next 12 months, we'll be bringing some of that on. And then over a longer period of time, we're working on a couple of different formulation concepts and one of those is a dry formulation, the other is a liquid, and so the idea there is kind of exactly what you're suggesting, that the beekeeper could mix it with their own sugar syrup and deliver it um, in a feeder. And so still a little more work to do on those, and we still have to get through the EPA registration process on those. But I would say within the next couple of years, we hope to have one or more solutions in that space.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Is Norroa exclusively available through Man Lake, or is it available other places?
At the moment, we're distributing exclusively through Man Lake, and then beyond that through their distribution partners. So
Okay. Okay. Vincent is asking, is treatment indicated during a honey flow?
that's a great question, and the point I failed to emphasize while I was going through this. There's no um, safety restrictions in terms of the honey flow. We have a tolerance exemption with EPA, so that supports the safety of the technology. But because Norroa has to be stored in the brood chamber, we don't want the honey supers on at the time of treatment. Because it's like any sugar syrup. If the honey supers are on, the bees are going to move it up into the supers and they won't use it in the brood food. So the active ingredient has to get into the brood food for it to be effective. And therefore, we don't want the honey supers on at the time of treatment. Um, if there's a honey flow on or a nectar flow, we've tested it in those environments. And again, as long as the colony's set up so they can store it in the brood chamber, we've seen very effective control, whether it's in a dearth or in a heavy nectar flow. But for optimal use and conditions and efficacy, we recommend that you avoid the extremes of that. You don't want the colony starving at the time of treatment, and the more honey that's coming in or nectar, the more it might get diluted. And so, but we've seen very good results in both of those situations. But the important thing is not to have the supers on at the time because you want it stored in the brood chamber.
Okay. Okay. So Carissa is it's a sort of expanding on that. She's saying you said Norroa provides Varroa control for 18 weeks. How much are you supposed to feed Norroa? Is it just a one-time application of 2 pouches per brood box, and that will provide control for the 18 weeks?
Yes. Yeah. We've
Okay.
seen, um, our studies, we've seen effective control up to 18 weeks. Sometimes it's 15. We've seen as little as 12 in some situations, but you're going to get that in that window. I'd say majority of our studies we're seeing up to 18 or around 18 weeks worth of suppression of the mite populations, keeping them below that 3% threshold. So you're always going to have some level of variability around that, but basically effective long control from that single treatment at the beginning. Again, if you've got a single brood box, then it'd be 2 pouches. If it's a double deep, then it'd be 4 pouches, but that should give you control through the season.
Okay.
And I,
So
I
two,
guess, sorry,
okay.
and just to
Sorry.
expand on that,
Yeah. Mhm.
if you think about the weather and when it's going to be, when the colonies are going to be going in your part of the world, that's going to be typically April, May, most likely, I assume, when the queen really gets going and you're starting to see them foraging. That'd be a great time to be able to treat Varroa. Give the queen a
Okay.
couple weeks to start laying eggs, so you've got active brood going, and then treat at that time. It should carry you through most of the summer.
So this is before you put your supers on. You put the 2 pouches on. You said they're sort of emptied in 2 to 3 days, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And
And
then after
essentially,
that, oh, good.
yeah, essentially, as soon as the pouches are empty, you can put the supers on
Super's right on after that.
probably within a week of treating. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Judy is asking, what is the dose for beekeepers using medium boxes only?
Medium boxes, is that the question?
Yes, medium, the dose for beekeepers using medium boxes. Yeah.
Yeah, we've not seen much of a difference. The deep boxes versus the mediums. If anything, you might get a little bit longer control from that treatment. Our label doesn't distinguish. Um, if you were going to tell me you were in a 5 frame nuke, then I would say your dose might be different. But it's really about getting a certain volume into that brood chamber, and then allow the bees to use it over time. And we just haven't seen much of a difference. Uh,
Okay. So would you put two pouches on a medium if you're
yes.
using medium and both at the same time? You wouldn't do the one and then
You
the,
you can do it either way. The label
okay.
allows you to treat both pouches at once, or you can split them over a couple weeks. Um, for whatever reason, a couple of the commercial beekeepers we were working with in development preferred to split their application, and with the concept that you extend the exposure period, but we haven't seen difference in results whether you treat at the same time or split it over a couple of weeks.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Angela is asking, can this be used as a prophylactic? I'm not entirely sure, Angela, what you mean by prophylactic. I mean, preventative to prevent the mite population from going
It,
up. If you want to come off mute and expand on that, or but the question is, can this be used as a prophylactic?
Yeah, I mean, I would at least frame it that that's kind of the way the product works, right? Because it prevents
Right.
reproduction. You want to treat when mite numbers are low and prevent the population from building in the first place. Yeah,
So I guess the answer is yes, that's the way it's supposed to be used, right?
correct.
Howard is asking, would you consider this an organic treatment?
Uh, I can't claim it as an organic treatment because OMRI doesn't recognize it as such. Um, so, you know, nucleic acids are certainly an organic material, and it in my definition, scientifically would qualify, but Omri doesn't recognize it as a organic substance. So,
Okay. Okay. What if bees do move the Norroa syrup from the brood area into a honey super? What if you put the honey super on? You're saying that don't put the honey super on before the pouches are empty, but what happens if they do move it into the honey super?
the only downside is you might see a little shorter efficacy because if it's moved up into the supers, they won't use it in the brood food. As I said earlier, we've got a tolerance exemption, so there's no issue with it being found in honey. RNA is already in honey
Mhm.
anyway from other sources, and so it's not going to change the character or taste or anything of the honey.
Okay. Lance is asking, how long can it be stored?
Uh, in the pouch, we guarantee 2 years shelf life from the date of manufacture, and so you shouldn't have any issue storing it even into next year if you needed to.
Okay. Um,
I will say, sorry to expand on that. We recommend to avoid extreme heat. And by extreme, I mean above 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So if some sort of temperature controlled storage is preferred, but as long as it's not getting extremely hot in there for long periods of time, it should be fine.
mhm. Okay,
We've
for
we've had
storage. Okay.
yeah, we've
Right.
had product at room temperature for probably 3+ years in the pouches and seen no evidence of degradation of the active ingredient. So.
Okay. Okay. Susan is asking if you treat early in the season after the queen starts, but before the supers come on, the 18 weeks will end in midsummer for me. Do I then do a second treatment?
So I always recommend to be monitoring my populations, you know, whether I typically recommend every 6 weeks because whether it's our product or somebody else's, it's going to break at some point. And you may have a situation where you might have a mite bomb from a neighbor or something like that, where new mites are coming in, and you need to be aware when those mite populations are building beyond threshold. So um, you you just have to monitor the mite populations and treat kind of when it's warranted. Um, if it's going to be Norroa in that next treatment, you'd want to treat before they reach the threshold, so maybe 2 to 3% infestation. If it's something else, maybe you could wait a little bit longer. But I've seen cases in our trials where it gives more than 18 weeks worth of control. So it's just going to depend, even colony to colony, it'll depend on when it's time to treat again.
So piggybacking on that question then, so what if she does exactly that? She starts the she finds that her treatment threshold is high. Then you're saying that she can do two treatments at a time. Like if what if she puts on Formic and she can also do the Neroa at the same time for her midsummer treatment?
Yes, that would be an option. So our label allows 2 applications per year, per calendar year. And so you can treat in the spring and again in the fall. If as I mentioned earlier, if mite numbers are getting high, so if they're above treatment threshold, then you should probably combine it with another mite product. Formic acid is one option. Oxalic acid could be another option to help knock the mite numbers down and then allow Neroa to keep them down.
And you can actually apply those treatments at the same time too. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And you mentioned something about I've seen in the photo it was on top of the top frames on the top of the hive, but you also mentioned it can be on the bottom board as well.
Yes, that's correct.
Uh-huh.
So the bees just need a little bit of space to get up on top of the pouch, be able to access the perforations. So if you're putting it on top of the frames, you typically need at least a half-inch spacer around the lid just to allow the bees to get up on top of the pouch and pull the material out of the pouch.
Did you see any difference in how quickly the pouches were emptied, whether you put it on the bottom board or the top?
No,
No. Okay.
no. I think Adam would say anecdotally he did a little trial in his hives at home, and according to him, the pouches were emptied quicker on the bottom board, but
Oh.
we
Uh-huh.
in our trials we didn't have any reports back from the beekeepers or the monitors that it took more than a couple of days for the pouches to be emptied.
Okay. And you don't have to you just there's the sticker that you peel back and there's little holes, the perforations, and they just come up and feed on it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So somebody is asking, can the product be frozen in the packet and then applied after reaching ambient temperature?
It can be. I mean, it's best if you can avoid freezing it because you've also got sugar in there and could crystallize. But um, uh, we have put it through freeze thaw cycles and seen no issues in terms of the active ingredient. You just want to make sure that it's warm enough for the bees to consume it. It does get fairly viscous at low temperatures, as you might imagine, with a high concentration of sugar in there. And that's why I said it when we tested it at really cool temperatures. It took the bees about a week to empty it, which I suspect was probably in part allowing the temperature of the pouch to come up a little bit
Mhm.
before they really started consuming it. So yeah, it's no issue if it freezes, but uh, just, yeah, bring it up to room temperature if you can before putting it in the hive.
Okay. Okay. I think your presentation was so
I,
comprehensive.
I,
Oh,
I had one other question.
sure. Go ahead.
Do you find that they emptied 100% the pouches, or is there some left over in the middle, kind of the center? Do they fully get all the solution out? Or should you open up the pouch at the end for them to get the residual?
So the ones I've seen, and when I've been doing these trials, I'll sometimes go out and help them put the trials out, and not unusual to go back 24 hours later and see essentially or nearly empty pouches already. But they really pretty much empty the pouches. The only report back I've heard is that if the colony is on a bit of an angle, you might get some pooling in one of the corners where the bees can't get to it, and so you may need to just readjust the pouch a bit so they can get to it, whatever's left in there. So if the pouches aren't empty in a couple days, worst case, you could slit the pouches, but we've based on our experience, you really don't need to
Did you say split the pouches? Split them all the way open?
slit them with a
Oh,
knife or
split them. Oh,
something,
okay, okay,
just
okay,
just so the bees can have a little easier access. But in my experience, you really don't need to do that in most situations.
okay, okay. Marie is asking a question. How do you manage splits and demery? Um, that's the question. Marie, if you wanted to expand on that a lot, the question is, how do you manage splits and demery? I guess if you're going to split, if you're going to demery, you would treat before you do that. Or is it, I'm not sure if I'm getting the full essence of the question.
So regarding splits, at least, a lot of our trials were done following splits, and so um, the best two times I would say that our product can be used is either coming out of overwintering, feed the colony, coming out of overwintering, let the queen get going so that the hive has some resources. That's a good time to use the product. The other time we've had a lot of success with is after splits. So you do your splits, and then that provides number one, a brood break, and that helps to knock mite numbers down just from a cultural standpoint, and let the new queen get going. Give her about 2 or 3 weeks to start laying again, and um, that's a great time to treat as well. We've had, I'd say, a majority of our trials were started after splits were done. As I mentioned, we're working with big commercial beekeepers, and so splits were a common part of their operations.
So in that case, I mean, okay, so you let the queen start going a little bit. So you're pulling a frame, you're looking to see whether there is open brood and then putting the pouches
Yeah.
on. Okay, okay.
Ideally, you want brood going before you
Yeah.
treat. Yeah.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah. I think that's, I guess, the tricky part a little bit because like you're saying like April and May, you don't want them to consume it immediately. You want them to incorporate in the brood box and you don't want them, but then honey supers come on like right after that, usually in this area too. So the
Yeah.
timing is a little bit tricky, right? I mean, you do have to make sure they're not starving. So would you like if you think they are a little hungry, you would give them some just plain sugar syrup first, then put the
Exactly.
pouch. Okay,
Yeah,
okay. So make
exactly.
sure they're
So if they're light, then feed them, give them a good solid feeding, and then come give them maybe a couple of days to so they're a little bit hungry, and then put the pouches on.
right. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Well, this was great. Anybody
Yeah.
else have, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing. This is awesome. Thank you.
Well,
Any,
I hope it was helpful. Maybe I'll just pause and see if there's any last questions that anyone has.
yes, I'm looking.
Anybody's part of Montgomery County, I'm actually giving a talk on Norroa on Thursday night at our meeting. So I've done a lot of
Right.
research on the product, Brian, and been working with Adam to get more information. So
Good. Good.
Lance is asking the ideal time to feed is March. I guess I mean in this area, yeah, I guess it sound that's the question. He's asking whether the ideal time to feed is March, but I guess it depends also on whether they're super hungry, right? You want to, but
Yeah.
yeah, I guess March, April, it would be the right time around here.
I'd say generally speaking, that's a good time to do it, right? After the colonies get going, and the queen's starting to lay, make sure they're well fed, and then you should be able to treat around that time.
Mhm.
And it is probably going to vary a bit by year, depending on what the weather's doing. So, yeah.
Right. And you said that some southern states do have you have reports of people putting them on the colonies now. I mean, so because the temperature is right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right.
And in South Florida and Texas, they don't ever really get a brood break. So it just kind
Right.
of slows down in the winter.
Right. Right. All
Yeah.
right. Well, this was
If
wonderful.
If not, I'd like to say thank you very much for the opportunity. We really appreciate the opportunity to talk about our product. I hope my excitement and enthusiasm came across about it, but really excited about this, really proud of it. But by the same token, I think it's a great new tool for you guys to use and hopefully uh, help keep your colony stronger and get more enjoyment out of your bees. So appreciate the opportunity and feel free to reach out if you've got further questions in the future, or, you know, give us feedback as well on how it's going if you're trying it. So,
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I really, really appreciate it. We're excited too. We were excited to have you come on, and thank you so much for your time.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
Brian.
Have a great
Take
evening.
care.
Thank
All
you.
right.
You
Bye. Say
too.
bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.